At 65, Simon Cowell is often seen as a symbol of power, wealth, and influence, a man whose raised eyebrow and sharp words once shaped the dreams of millions. To the public, he appeared untouchable, a titan of entertainment who ruled television talent shows with confidence and control. Yet behind the carefully tailored suits and commanding presence is a life shaped by insecurity, loss, physical pain, and hard-earned self-awareness. His story is not one of uninterrupted success, but of repeated reinvention, emotional isolation, and the quiet realization that fame cannot protect anyone from life's deeper trials. What the audience saw on screen was only part of the truth. The rest unfolded away from cameras, in moments of silence, regret, and reflection. Childhood without applause. Simon Philip Cowell was born in London in 1959, into a household that appeared stable and creative from the outside. His father worked in the music industry, and his mother was a trained ballet dancer, elegant and disciplined. But warmth was scarce, praise was rare, achievement, not affection, was the currency of approval. Simon later reflected that he could not remember his father ever telling him he was proud. That absence stayed with him, shaping how he viewed success and self-worth. As a child, he learned early that love had to be earned, not freely given, and that lesson would echo throughout his life in ways he did not fully understand until much later. A restless student school did little to ease his sense of disconnection. Simon was not academically gifted, nor particularly interested in following rules. He clashed with authority, struggled to focus, and felt overshadowed by peers who seemed to fit more easily into the system. Teachers did not see promise in him, and classmates did not see a leader. What they saw was a restless boy who did not know where he belonged. That feeling of invisibility cut deeply. Each academic disappointment reinforced the belief that he was falling behind, that he lacked something essential others possessed. Those early doubts would become both a wound and a driving force. Entering the music world. The hard way Simon's entry into the music industry was far from glamorous. He did not arrive as a visionary executive or a tastemaker. Instead, he started at the bottom, working mundane jobs, sorting mail, running errands, and watching from the sidelines as others received recognition. He was surrounded by success, yet excluded from it, close enough to touch, but never invited inside. He later admitted that these years were humiliating, filled with moments when he questioned whether he belonged anywhere at all. Still, even in obscurity, he observed everything, learning how decisions were made, how trends shifted, and how power truly operated behind the scenes. Failure before fame. In the 1980s, Simon took a risk and launched his own small record label. For a brief period, it worked. A handful of releases gained attention, and he experienced the thrill of being noticed. But the success was fragile. The industry changed, sales declined, and debts mounted quickly. Within a few years, the label collapsed. Simon returned home defeated, forced to confront failure in the same place where his ambition had first been formed. Friends drifted away, confidence evaporated, and the sense of shame was overwhelming. He later described this period as one of the lowest points in his life, a moment when everything he believed about himself seemed to fall apart. Learning from collapse. That failure, however, reshaped him. When Simon re-entered the music business in the 1990s, he did so with fewer illusions. He abandoned the idea of being admired by critics and focused instead on understanding audiences. He paid attention to what people genuinely enjoyed, not what industry insiders considered respectable. This shift in perspective transformed his career. He found success by embracing accessibility and emotion rather than perfection. Acts that others dismissed resonated with the public, and Simon learned that connection mattered more than approval. That insight became the foundation of everything he built next. Television changes everything. When Simon stepped onto television as a judge, the reaction was immediate and polarizing. His blunt honesty shocked audiences accustomed to polite encouragement. But what some saw as cruelty, others recognized as authenticity. He said what many people thought but rarely heard aloud. That honesty became his trademark. Viewers tuned in not just for performances, but for his reactions. His presence redefined the role of a television judge, turning critique into entertainment. Almost overnight, he became one of the most recognizable figures in global media. Fame and isolation. With success came immense pressure. Simon's schedule became relentless, spanning continents and time zones. The public saw confidence, but privately, exhaustion set in. The applause faded when the cameras turned off, replaced by quiet hotel rooms and long flights. Despite being surrounded by people, he often felt alone. The child who once longed for recognition had achieved it on a massive scale, yet the fulfillment he expected never fully arrived. Fame amplified everything, including loneliness, public scrutiny, and private reckoning. As his visibility increased, so did scrutiny. Every decision was dissected, every misstep magnified. When his personal life became the subject of headlines, the judgment was swift and unforgiving. For someone who had spent years evaluating others, being evaluated so harshly was deeply unsettling. Simon acknowledged his mistakes without deflection, later describing the period as one of profound self-examination. It forced him to confront who he was beyond his public persona and what truly mattered to him. Fatherhood changes the equation. The birth of his son marked a turning point. Fatherhood introduced a sense of responsibility and purpose unlike anything Simon had experienced. His priorities shifted. Work no longer defined his entire identity. Time became more valuable, not as a resource to be maximized, but as something to be shared. He often spoke about how becoming a parent softened him, grounding him in ways success never could. It was not redemption in a dramatic sense, but a quiet reorientation of values. Grief behind closed doors. Loss has been a constant undercurrent in Simon's life. The passing of his parents left a void that fame could not fill. Grief forced him to slow down, to feel emotions he had long suppressed. These moments of vulnerability were not public spectacles, but private reckonings. He learned that strength was not about endurance alone, but about allowing himself to mourn, reflect, and remember. Physical vulnerability. Later in life, physical setbacks forced Simon Cowell to confront something he had spent decades outrunning: his own limits. Accustomed to long hours, relentless schedules, and an almost stubborn refusal to slow down, he suddenly found himself in a position where rest was not optional but necessary. Injuries demanded patience, rehabilitation, and dependence on others, all things that challenged his deeply ingrained sense of control. For a man who had built an empire by pushing forward regardless of exhaustion or doubt, the experience was humbling. Recovery became more than a physical process. It was emotional and psychological, stripping away the illusion of invincibility he had unknowingly carried for years. In learning how fragile the body could be, Simon also learned how precious time truly was. Health was no longer something to assume or postpone. It became central to how he viewed his future, reshaping his understanding of balance, longevity, and self-care. The pressure of appearance. Working for decades in an industry obsessed with youth and image left its mark. Simon Cowell existed under constant scrutiny, not only for his words and decisions, but for how he looked while delivering them. Over time, he openly acknowledged experimenting with cosmetic procedures, initially as a way to maintain confidence under unforgiving studio lights. But as public reactions grew louder and harsher, he found himself facing a painful irony. The man who had spent years evaluating appearances and performances was now being judged with the same unforgiving lens. The criticism was relentless, often unkind, and deeply personal. Eventually, Simon reached a quiet realization. Chasing an idealized version of himself was costing more than it was giving. Choosing to step away from cosmetic alterations became less about defiance and more about acceptance. It marked a turning point, a conscious decision to age naturally and prioritize authenticity over expectation. In doing so, he reclaimed ownership of his image, no longer shaped solely by public opinion. Reassessing legacy. As time passed, Simon Cowell began to reflect more deeply on the concept of legacy. Early in his career, success had been measured in numbers, ratings, record sales, global reach. But with age came perspective. The question shifted from how much he could build to what his work truly meant. Legacy, he realized, was not defined only by careers launched or shows created, but by how people felt working alongside him and what values he left behind. Relationships became more important than expansion, honesty more meaningful than applause. He grew increasingly selective, choosing projects that aligned with his evolving priorities, rather than chasing scale for its own sake. This period of reassessment did not diminish his ambition, it refined it. His focus turned toward sustainability, mentorship, and the long-term impact of influence used responsibly. A softer authority. Those who work closely with Simon today often describe a noticeable shift in his leadership style. While he remains direct and decisive, there is greater patience in his approach and more willingness to listen. Experience tempered what was once perceived as harshness, replacing it with clarity and purpose. He learned that authority did not need to rely on fear or intimidation to be effective. Guidance could be firm without being cruel, honest without being dismissive. This transformation did not happen overnight. It emerged gradually, shaped by years of reflection, missteps, and the awareness that influence carries responsibility. The man once known for cutting remarks evolved into someone more conscious of how words land and how power is felt by others. Understanding success. Differently, Simon Cowell's journey reveals a truth often hidden beneath celebrity. Success does not erase insecurity, nor does power shield anyone from pain. His life illustrates that ambition and vulnerability are not opposites, but companions. The drive that fueled his rise was forged not in applause, but in moments of rejection, doubt, and failure. Each setback taught him resilience. Each criticism sharpened his perspective. Over time, he came to understand that growth is rarely born from triumph alone. It emerges from discomfort, reflection, and the willingness to confront one's own flaws. Success, in this sense, became less about dominance and more about understanding of people, of audiences, and ultimately, of himself. Where he stands now. At 65, Simon Cowell is no longer defined solely by sharp critiques or chart-topping formats. He is a man shaped by experience, carrying both pride and regret, confidence and humility. His story is not one of dramatic downfall or cinematic redemption, but of adaptation. He learned when to push forward and when to pause, when to speak and when to listen. Life's value, he discovered, lies not only in achievement but in connection. Moments shared, lessons learned, and time spent with those who matter most. This stage of his life reflects a quieter strength, one built not on control, but but on clarity. A human legacy. The true legacy of Simon Cowell extends beyond the stars he helped launch, or the global franchises he created. It lies in the reminder that even the most confident public figures are human beneath the surface. His life demonstrates that growth is ongoing, that reflection is essential, and that meaning evolves with time. Behind the familiar image is a man who learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, that fulfillment does not come from commanding others, but from understanding himself. That lesson, earned through decades of experience, may be his most enduring contribution. Closing reflection. Simon Cowell's life is a study in contrast. Confidence shaped by doubt, authority softened by vulnerability, ambition balanced by acceptance. His story challenges assumptions about success and reminds us that no one escapes hardship, regardless of status or achievement. At this stage of his life, he appears less interested in proving himself and more focused on being present. Perhaps that is the quiet victory he spent decades searching for. Not dominance, not constant applause, but peace.